right, everybody, we'll get started here. Welcome to the season finale of Ahead of the Game webinar series, Field Hockey Canada. Today we have a really cool and kind of a different episode, actually. We've got Laurie Hogan and Keely Dunn here to talk about their careers as international officials and umpires. And as opposed to a previous episode in where I would just sort of hand the keys over to our presenters and they would just fire away, today it's going to be a bit more of a back and forth, a bit more of a sort of question answer interview style presentation to go through Laurie and Keely's career. We're going to talk a little bit about their introduction, talk about some domestic and international experience, and then talk a little bit more about the umpiring and officials pathway and how people can kind of get on and get going. So as far as questions go, I would love to ask a few that come through during the conversation. So please do feel free to post them in the chat box. I'll track them down and either ask them on the fly or ask them at the end. But please don't hesitate at any point to fire a question in the chat box. As usual, if you've been to any of these things before, please keep your mics muted and your videos off, so it keeps the feature on our main talent, Laurie and Keely. So without further ado, let's get into it. I'm going to fire up a little presentation to help guide us, but it's Laurie Hogan and Keely Dunn here to talk officiating in the FHC world. So let's just share my screen. Give me a little sec here. And maybe I'll just ask Laurie, can you see, are we up on the screen here?
Yes, you are.
Nice, and not even on the opening slide. Perfect. Okay. We are good to go. I'm going to open things up here and talk. We're going to do a little bit of an introduction, but both of you have a rich, long history of being involved in field hockey in Canada. Maybe starting with Keely, maybe you could just introduce yourself and talk a little bit about how you got into hockey to start, and then we'll do Laurie, and then we'll get going on the sort of officiating side.
Yeah, you bet. When you describe it as being a long, rich history, I'm pretty sure that's just code for old, but I'll take it. I'm totally fine with that. That's good. So yeah, because I am old, I have been around the game for a long time in Canada, and in umpiring particularly, like a lot of people, I got forced into it. So it would have been back when I was about 18 years old, and I had just started training with the University of Calgary Dinos, and I was on a club team with a whole bunch of other Dinos and Alberta players, and players that I really wanted to impress and be on their good side. And one of the senior players needed to umpire the next game, and she looked at me and she said, no, here, you take the whistle, you do it. And I said, okay, fine. And that was the start of my umpiring career. And I did that did club hockey for about 10 years and ended up, I was at senior nationals and I was 29 years old. So just about 3 years ago. And I had just come off the field after scoring my very first goal for Alberta. So people who know me know that I'm really a thoroughly mediocre player. So this is a big deal for me. I scored like the fourth goal in a 5-2 victory and ripped my shirt off and ran around the field like this and did the whole thing. And I walked off the field and this tall, bald guy with, the umpiring pants on walked up to me and he said, so when are you going to quit this playing malarkey and become an umpire? And I sort of looked at him and I said, sorry, who are you? And it was Ian Gibson. And those people who remember Ian's massive contributions to the umpiring community, I mean, he was a very charismatic and persuasive guy. And he managed to convince me that despite the fact that they had never seen me umpire, that they watched me play and saw what a great cheat I was and knew that I would be a very good umpire out of that. So that started the ball rolling for me. I ended up very quickly the following year, I umpired at senior nationals, went on tour with the Canadian women's team almost immediately after, and got my international badge a few months after that. So it all happened really, really quickly at that point. And then there was about 18 years of me contributing to Canadian hockey on the umpiring scene. So that's kind of the Coles and Oates version of how I got into umpiring here in Canada.
Thank you.
I can
Laurie.
keep going if you want.
No. We will keep going. Laurie, maybe you could talk about your introduction into the sport and how you made the transition to the official side of the game.
Yeah, sure. So my introduction into the world was similar to Keely's, where I was introduced to technical official in university and then immediately afterwards. So I played at Carleton in Ottawa back in the day when they had a team. And when I graduated, I actually took over the role as the team manager. And back then, the team manager was responsible for staffing the table. So when we hosted games, I had to find people to sit there. So I met the Julie Nelsons of the world and a few others in Ottawa that were pretty into it. Did that for a few years. The same year I stepped back from the team, the OUA, which is the Ontario University Association or athletics, whatever it is. They made the decision that that role was no longer associated to the team. So the same year I stepped away from the team, they needed people. So it just kind of continued. Started with Ottawa, Kingston, Montreal, slowly grew into Toronto games. I think he's on here. I saw his name in the waiting room. Ozias D'Souza was a huge influence on keeping me in there. He kind of did the West games. I did the East. We came together for the OUA championships and then for U Sport finals when they were in Toronto. That was really how I got into it. My path into international was much slower than Keely's. I think on the tech official side, it usually is. I did that for about 10 years just in Ontario and locally until I got my first Pan Am appointment in 2015. So it took me about 10 years of doing it actively, most of my free time before I got that international appointment.
Right on. And thank you both for being here. And we're going to talk a little bit more about your both domestic experience and your international experience. But I'll throw you out the first curveball of our presentation. Just maybe starting with Keely, you can mention like what it's like to transition from being on the field as a player to on the field as an umpire. Obviously, different responsibilities, different part of the game. Did you ever find that you were missing being on the field as a player, or was it a pretty smooth transition for you?
Oh, that's a great question. Actually, I do remember very clearly that first senior nationals that I went from playing for Alberta with all my friends to being the umpire and still being around my friends, but not with my friends. And I felt a little bit isolated, no question. And I missed the competitive nature of what was happening. I mean, I was always really quite realistic that my playing career had really been on wobbly legs for the entire time that I ever had a stick in my hand. So I knew I wasn't going anywhere, and that if there was an opportunity for me to be able to participate in the game, and especially in higher levels of the game, in a way that I couldn't as a player, that was something, for whatever reason, just really grabbed my attention. And I thought that was an awesome idea. And so, yeah, it was hard for the first little while, and I didn't really fit in with the umpiring group because of my weird background, because I hadn't really gone through the steps, and I didn't understand at the time. I didn't know why I wasn't massively popular. I should have been. And I felt kind of, I really did feel like an outsider for a while. And it takes time, it takes experience, and people need to trust in you and your contributions. And that only comes from years and years and years. And now I can look at all the people that I was obviously rubbing the wrong way when I first started out being a punk ass kid. And now we're great friends and we have tons of mutual respect. So, it's hard at the beginning, no question, but I'm really glad I made the transition. I wish, though, that I had done it way sooner in my career. I wish I'd given up competitively playing way earlier, because I would have been a far better umpire.
And Laurie, similarly to you, what was it like transitioning from being like on a team on the field to being maybe in the booth or at the table, but still a part of a team, but just like a different team, and the sort of the off-field officiating side of the game? What was it like for you making that transition out of competitive hockey into officiating?
I think that it really didn't hit me until like a few years into it. Like the first few games, you're kind of you're now on the side of the umpire. So it's just a different perspective of the game. So the first few years, it was getting used to being part of that group. But it really didn't hit me that I wasn't part of the playing group anymore when the kids that I coached when they were like 14 and 15 started playing in university. And they would come to me because I was their first competitive coach. So they'd come to me in like breaks and it was like, oh, I can't tell you anything. Like, and that was really where it kind of hit me that I'm in a different role now and I have to step back from that guiding people. Because before that, when I was on the team manager side, just doing the table for when we hosted, I could still work with the players and help them and like off their game time, right? But when it came to like, I'd stepped away and I was now with the OUA and the kids that I had known for over 10 years coming to me and asking for advice, it was really hard to like step back and say, go talk to your coach, have them figure it out.
Yeah, that's interesting. If we're going to move forward to domestic experiences here, the three of us actually worked together for Field Hockey Canada at the National Championships in Toronto in 2018. That's when I would have first met the two of you. But the two of you have again a lot of experience working club, nationals, U Sports, formerly known as CIS. Maybe we can start with Laurie this time and just maybe you can break down a few of your domestic experiences and what it's like being on the table at those tournaments, and just any stories that come out from those experiences.
Yeah, so domestic in Ontario, we have a few tournaments that would have a tech official or a table provincially. So most of my experience came with OUA for a long time. I did some of the provincial May Meltdown tournaments as either a judge or a TO. I was TD there last year, I think it was. And then obviously it didn't happen this year. Nationals, I did a nationals in Brampton. I think it was like 2016. I'm really bad at years. And I did like maybe 2013. I don't know. I did a couple nationals. And then the 2018 Nationals in Toronto was there for the full festival. So did a lot of the background work to set it up, and then was there the whole time and really bonded with the two of you and everyone else. Do a lot of indoor as well. In Ontario, there's lots of indoor. So Shank has a great tournament in Kitchener-Waterloo that he has me come to as a tech official. In the last couple of years, he's been really generous to let me use that as an opportunity to train some of the younger ones that we're trying to get through, some of the newer people to doing it. Usually the first few days of a domestic tournament, it's kind of messy, to put it nicely. There's always a lot of learning. So I think my hope is that in the future we can get a strong core group that can move those things forward a little bit cleaner. Always lots to learn and always new people there. So it feels like every time you're starting over, but I think we've got a pretty good core group now to keep it moving forward.
Yeah. And then maybe just to follow up before I hop over to Keely, Laurie, you mentioned having new people involved, getting new blood in the system. How can you, best encourage people to get involved with the technical official side of the game? Obviously, we'll talk later about the family and the people behind the scenes, that make everything work. But, in your experience, it was a fairly smooth transition, like you were talking about. How can you get more people on the table?
We get a lot of parents, which is great. We get some people that used to play competitive and are looking for a new avenue to stay involved in the sport. So that's always great too. It's a great way to stay involved and see the game from a different perspective. So even if you are a current player, you're going to see the game in a different way after being an official, whether you're at the table or on the field. And really, if somebody's trying to decide between being an umpire or a tech official, you're not going to get yelled at by coaches. You actually get to tell coaches to stop yelling at umpires, right? So there's kind of some perks, and there's really you need a strong personality to be able to manage all the people around the game. So there's a few people that they don't feel comfortable doing that, and it's just kind of helping them develop those skills.
Right on. Keely, you're a very experienced umpire and also an umpire manager. Maybe you could talk to us a little bit about your journey, on home soil and what it's like being a Canadian umpire, and a little bit about your pathway here at home?
Yeah, sure. It really, I think, sort of set me up, because moving straight from playing right into umpiring, I already had that very strong tradition, I guess, or practice of just summers were hockey for me. I didn't ever think that I'd ever go on a holiday or go camping or do any of those other things that normal people do. Summer was for hockey. And so as soon as I started umpiring, it was the same thing. Whatever tournament was on, or tournaments, and especially, back when I started out, we had more domestic competitions than we do now. I would just be available for everything. Just put me on everything. I want to do all of it. And so starting out in, I think it was 2001 at seniors, every year, I think I was at a tournament until at least about 2006. So I did things like Canada Summer Games in 2001 and 2005. I did so many of the under 14, then to be under 15, under 16, under 18, under 21 tournaments, and did all those. And then in the fall, because especially in this area in Calgary, we didn't have a lot of umpires who were qualified at a high enough level. So I absolutely did a lot of the university games for a long time. And it wasn't until I started going abroad a bit more that I missed out on some of those tournaments, but I was just involved in them all. And then I did my first umpire managing experience in 2004. I did the under 14s here in Calgary. And so I got to work at a very mellow sort of casual introductory tournament with lots of great eager kids playing, but not as much pressure on the umpires. And that was my introduction to that. And I started teaching umpiring, running up the certification clinics for Field Hockey Canada here around that time. And I've been doing that ever since. So I've actually been umpire managing almost as long as I've been umpiring, which is pretty crazy. And just obviously doing a bit less of that, but doing the younger age groups, and then doing umpiring at the various tournaments and things like that. So yeah, it's been when you asked for sort of that resume of all the things I've done, I can't remember them all. And all I can do is look back at pictures and find occasional files and say, oh yeah, I did that tournament. And then it reminds me. But yeah, it's been almost a couple decades of going to tournaments and serving the game, but it's been awesome, and I wouldn't change a thing.
And then just a similar follow-up that I asked to Laurie, but now sort of on the umpiring side, most sports, I imagine, are always sort of scrambling to get more umpires, more referees in their game. And field hockey is no exception, especially here in Canada. What can we do as a community to get, more umpires? And what would you recommend to young players who are, finishing their playing career or still want to get involved? But, how would you help shepherd young people through into that pathway where they can become umpires?
The biggest selling point that I would put in front of a player is that if you umpire the game, it's going to make you a better player. Because if you actually expose yourself to an understanding of the rules at that level, kind of like how I was when I was younger, I was a great cheat. I understood the rules backwards and forwards because that's the only advantage I had. I didn't have physicality. I didn't have athleticism or anything like that. It was my brains. And so for any player who's looking for that extra advantage that's going to, take them to the next level, umpiring is going to do it. And there's a lot of ways that you can work with people in your area to be able to balance the requirements of playing and adding umpiring into that mix. So I don't think players should ever be intimidated and think that at a young age that they have to quit playing in order to umpire. They absolutely don't. In my case, I should have, particularly just because I was rocketing to the top as fast as I could. So I needed to drop the playing at that point and that sort of thing. But you can play at an older age group and then umpire at a younger one. And in terms of your development as a human being, it's, like Laurie was saying, that she really works with junior technical officials on developing their soft skills and how to manage people and how to you deal with conflicts and communicate effectively and be organized and all those things. When you're developing your skills as an umpire, all the things that you learn about dealing with conflict and having the confidence to stick to what, the best job that you can do. There's a real concept for all of us out there who are perfectionists that we get scared to try something because we don't want to fail. Well, umpiring is nothing but a series of, sequential failures that you live through, and you realize, well, nobody died on the pitch today, so I guess I did okay. And that helps build that confidence in you as a person, so that when you go for that job interview, or you have to do that big project, or whatever the case might be, that you've gained that skill. And there's not a lot of places you can develop that in the way that you can and still be able to enjoy the passion that you have for the game. So that's how I would sell it to young people. And then just from our perspective as umpires, we need to do better at being more personable to the people that we want to recruit. When we're umpiring at tournaments, we got to talk to players more. We got to talk to coaches more. We got to show them that we're having fun and that we're not a bunch of, stodgy, stern people. Like, we have a riot, and that's what players don't often see. So if we were better at that, I think we would put together a much more appealing, sales package for those young players and get them in the game.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Well, and from my time working with the officiating crew in 2018, I can vouch that it's a great time, and it's tons of fun. Scooting forward to your international experiences, both of you have taken your officiating careers beyond Canada's borders and have worked internationally. Obviously, right now, in the current conditions, there's a pause on international competition, and for good reason, of course. But maybe you can track back a little bit and look through your careers and talk a little bit about your experience internationally. Let's throw to Laurie first, and maybe you could just talk about your jump to international, and then maybe any experiences or stories that come out of that.
Sure. Do you want to move the slides forward? As much fun as it is to look at us in university.
Is it not moving for you?
No, it's still on the first intro slide.
Oh, shoot.
That's what I see.
I prefer that. I'm a lot skinnier in those photos.
Well, let me see.
Well, there's a domestic. Okay, you're getting there.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess it was different on my side. Let's see if this works better.
I can talk while you're playing with
Sure.
that. So, yeah, go ahead. What?
Oh, I was just going to say, I have it up on international now. Is it showing on your side?
Still domestic on my side, but that's fine because both of my pictures are from international events. So for me, it took a long time to get to the international point, and I'm okay with that. It came when it did. My very first appointment would have been a Canadian-Ireland test series in Toronto, and that was a pre-event to the Pan Am 2015 games. So that was my very first international experience. Then I did the Pan Am Games in Toronto in 2015. So it's kind of a big event to have as your first event, which is great. Back then you were assigned as either a TO or a judge, and at the Pan Am Games, that's what you stuck to. So I was a judge for the full games, and a judge is the timekeeping and the scorekeeping. So there's two roles there that I did for all of the games, which was great. From there, I did the World League Round 2 in Vancouver. And then that was in 2017. So the first picture of me there is the very first game of World League Round 2 was India and Uruguay. And I had just done one international tournament at this point, and the second tournament that I go to, the very first game I was put in as TO because the experienced TO was from India and couldn't do it. So the picture there is me terrified. But I had a really great TD that had a lot of faith in me and really helped me through everything from pre-game chat right through the whole game. She was constantly nearby if I had a question or needed something. The game went fairly smoothly. There were a few hiccups that inevitably happen, especially it was a new coach for the Indian team. It was interesting to say the least. A lot of puffing chests of coaches to say how great they were, kind of thing. But I learned a lot and I don't regret it. It was a great experience, especially for my second tournament, first opportunity to be a TO. From there, I did the Youth Olympics qualifier, which was hockey fives in Mexico. And I actually really liked hockey fives. It was really fast, Youth Olympics, so they're pretty young and fit, but it was a really fun tournament because it was completely different. I had never seen hockey fives played. I've never participated. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. And that was in Guadalajara, Mexico. From there, I did the Pan Am Games again in Peru last year. So I was a tech official and a judge. And the second picture of me on there is the very first game of Pan Am Games last year, where I was the tech official for the first game. I can't remember who was playing and I didn't look it up today, but you can see that there were a lot of people in the booth, all of us trying to figure out what was going on. But it was a great experience as well, because the very first game of a tournament like that, you're ironing out a lot of details and you have to make decisions on the fly. Had the same TO as I had, or same TD I had in Vancouver, so I knew I was well supported. And it was just a lot of fun, a lot of pressure. I know Argentina was playing that game because the night before, the Argentinian men's TD sat down with me and helped me learn some Spanish phrases like sit down, please go, stop talking, things like that. So it was fun. I had a really great time at the Pan Am Games. I lived in Ottawa for the last most of my tech official career, and one thing that happened with both Toronto and Vancouver was I was considered the local person because I was Canadian. There were actually people from the Caribbean that had a shorter flight to Vancouver than I did from Ottawa, but I was still considered local. So that was fun because I got to show them Canada from my perspective. I'm also lucky to have friends in Toronto and Vancouver that could help us out with that. But I think one thing, if you are ever appointed to a tournament in your home country, regardless of what city it is, do your research because you are going to be the local. That's really my tip there. So yeah, if it had been in Calgary, I would have been calling Keely for some advice. Yeah, so that's really my international experience. I did a men's test series in Vermont last year. It was supposed to be in Quebec, but their field wasn't ready yet. So that was my first men's international game. And then at the Pan Am Games in 2019, we did men's games as well. So men's games is a different dynamic than women's. And I do enjoy doing the men's side as well. And that's my outdoor experience. I have a bit of indoor, but just some Pan Am Cups the Can-Am Cups, so Canadian American, and then a few things here and there in Toronto when they host. But that's my international experience.
Cool, and it's funny to hear you mention that two of your first, several are sort of on home soil international experiences, even though you're not from there specifically. That's an interesting little tidbit. Keely, same question for you. Obviously, you've been at the international side of things a little bit longer than Laurie, but maybe you could just talk about what it's like working on the international scene and going out to these big major international competitions and just the maybe the feel of the tournament and what the sort of next level feels like when you go from maybe working like a CIS event and then you're going out and you're doing a major international competition. What's the comparison like?
It's actually really fun because one of the things that I absolutely love about participating in tournaments in Canada is I think we feel like we're maybe small time hockey or we're minnows and that sort of thing. But from an organizational perspective and a support perspective, we do a really amazing job in preparing our behind the scenes people to help run an amazing tournament. So I didn't know it at the time because you have no idea what you know or you don't know when you're first starting out on the international scene. But I look back and I realize that our technical officials here in Canada do an amazing job at applying really good international standards to tournaments and help making sure all those matches are going very smoothly. Our umpires are, quite well prepared to step up to the next level. That being said, though, let me tell you that first tournament that I went to in 2002 in Puerto Rico, it was the Central American Caribbean Games. And I ended up going to that tournament 4 times in my career. I was a regular. It was awesome. But I remember just walking and just having no clue whatsoever what was going on. I was absolutely lost. And I was so naive. I just walked in and said, "Hey, everything's great." And it went off without a hitch. But if I had known so many more things, I would have been so much of a better umpire. But that's part and parcel of the learning process. After, that kind of debut, I look back now and I realize that I went to a lot of tournaments as a Canadian umpire and had a lot of opportunities that were given to me. I went to 2 Junior World Cups in 2005 and 2009, and I was at a World Cup qualifier in Russia, in Kazan. I did the African qualifier for the Olympic Games back in 2011, I think. I did another Olympic qualifier in Antwerp in 2012. So I got to see some of the big staged events, and I'd say definitely that the Junior World Cups were the biggest hockey events, because you had 16 teams there each time, and there was a massive umpiring team, and you had at least 2 umpire managers. I think we might have had 3 at one of them. And there was just so much going on, and so much coordination, and the media, and all the things that you saw behind the scenes that even players don't get to see was an amazing experience, just absolutely incredible. Aside from all of the international matches that I did, and by the time I retired in 2016, I finally sent in my letter. But I ended up with around 110 international caps, and went to about 30 tournaments, which is just incredible. So lucky. But there were other non-FIH international experiences in there, like going down to the Cal Cup quite regularly. I think I've probably been to about 10 of them over the last 2 decades, mostly as an umpire, but I've now gone down as an umpire manager as well. And those were just amazing tournaments. They're so much fun. And I mean, it's America, so there's always crazy going on down there. And seeing a different approach to hockey, a different hockey culture was great. And then in 2006, I started going over to England and umpiring in the National League there. And I'd go over for a couple months and do the majority of, say, what you would call their fall season, come home for Christmas, go back and do another 2 to 3 months. And then I'd go off to international tournaments from there. And it was just crazy times. And I did that for 6 seasons. And I actually looked back on my match list, because I kept a track of all those games. And I did over 100 games over there. And sort of in 6 seasons, I did more matches there than I think I've ever been able to do in Canada. And that's part of the just the difference in numbers and hockey culture there. So that was an experience that I was able to obtain that, I wouldn't have as a player. And being able to insinuate myself into a foreign community and learn from them and understand that culture and their practices, and then try to bring that home here to Canada has just been so incredibly valuable. So that's another selling point for young umpires, is that it's a great way to be able to get out there and see more of the world. And I've been everywhere, and it's to places I never would have gotten to, and in a way that I wouldn't have gotten to if I was just a tourist. I got to know real people and real situations, and it was amazing. And then just my most recent international experience would have been in my first appointment as an assistant umpire manager to Soledad de Paraguay we were in Bolivia, in Cochabamba, for the South American Games. And that was incredible. Alan Waterman was also there as an umpire manager on the men's side. So I had Canadian friends, and it was just an incredible experience as well. So I've been incredibly lucky, and that's pretty much all I can say about that.
Well, we'll probably get you to say a little bit more, because this is a great answer that leads us into our next slide. And again, I'm not 100% sure if the slides are keeping up with our conversation, but in any case, it looks like it's going now. What keeps us going? What keeps us involved behind the scenes? Naturally, some of the sport spotlight gets shed, probably the majority of it gets shed onto the players and coaches. And often the officiating crew kind of goes unseen, almost sometimes for the better, going unseen. But, obviously not the same amount of recognition or perhaps glory that might get put with the athletes and coaches themselves. But throwing that aside, you've both been involved for many years now. What keeps you coming back? Maybe we'll start with Laurie, but I think we've already sort of tracked a bit of a pathway to answering this question. And what keeps you coming back? What keeps you engaged? Why do you want to keep improving and making that next appointment? What keeps you driven?
I think we've touched on a lot of it. The community itself. So building those friendships with people that I would have never met before, but we, aside from even just field hockey, we have a lot in common. The passion that's in the sport really keeps me involved, and officials, players, coaches, everyone's so passionate. And sorry, my dog is now really loud all of a sudden. So everyone's passion really keeps me involved, because it makes me want to do better, because how hard they're working, I want to do better as well. Being with like-minded people, so having some of those like philosophical, what if this had happened, how would we make a decision, what would we do? Having people that you can bounce those ideas off of and connect with, whether you're going to see them at another tournament or not, we can always stay in touch. Having fun, like if we're not having fun, why are we still doing it? And like Keely said, we actually do have a lot of fun. And we learn from each other and kind of build those relationships as we go forward. So I think, like, for me, it's all about the people that are around the sport, and the why I go back is because I really enjoy the people and the learning and the challenges, and the growing as a person and not just as an official.
Yeah, I think it shows it's an intoxicating environment to be a part of the sport environment and growing together, not just on the field, but also off the field. Keely, do you maybe want to elaborate a little bit? What keeps you going? You said you had your first international appointment in 2002, but here you are going down as a UM just last year. So, what keeps you going?
As an umpire, I was absolutely, and I still am, absolutely entranced with how bloody challenging umpiring is. And I've done a few hard things in my life, but I will say to anybody that umpiring is the hardest thing I've ever done, to try to reach for that perfection. If you like that kind of challenge, umpiring's for you, because it's always changing, it's always shifting, there's so many variables, and so much goes into a good performance. So it's really personally satisfying when you improve and when you know that you're improving. And it's not that you get the applause or you get your name on the stat sheet, it's that an amazing game of hockey is played in front of you, and even if the players don't turn around and give you a round of applause as you're walking off the field, you serve their best hockey that day. And it's hard to describe, because it seems, if you've never done it, you're probably wondering, what the hell am I talking about? But honestly, it's such a gratifying feeling. But incredibly, that has been trumped for me in becoming an umpire manager, because now I take the incredible challenge of being an umpire, and now I get to coach it. And for everybody out there who are coaches, how rewarding it is to be able to give something to your player, your umpires, and they run with it, they improve, the light bulbs go off when they finally understand a concept you've been trying to teach them, or they do that amazing game that they're able to provide for the players. And it just brings me such joy. There has been no role, I think, there isn't a role, I think, that is more demanding in a tournament than an umpire manager. I'm not going to lie. It is ridiculously hard work. It is nonstop, at least 16 hours a day, and you are absolutely shattered at the end of it, and you spend 3 days on your couch afterwards, just sleeping and drinking wine and watching Netflix. And then 3 days later, like, when's the next tournament? Can I get out there? So to me, that's, that's where it really comes in. The ability to be able to serve and make those games better just is incredible. So you add that to everything that Laurie said, the collegiality, the being around fellow hockey nerds. There are no bigger nerds than umpires. And I just, through everything that I do with FH umpires, I'm always blown away with how I give people material and then they're like, can you talk to us for another hour? And I cannot believe how much more that umpires want to soak in, but that's what it's like. You're with a bunch of people who are just as obsessed as you are, and it's a magnificent experience to be with your people. So I think it's definitely something that you want to try. You might want to avoid the umpire managing if you don't like to work for 20 hours a day, but you might like that too. So you never know.
Nice. Well, you heard it here first. Keely will stay on for hours after this call if you want to chat with her. We had a question come in just before we move on to talk a little bit about the FHC umpire and official pathway. We had a question come in from one of our viewers. So the question is are there tournaments, clubs, or countries that you feel just get it right in terms of how they treat officials, players, families, etc.? How can we learn from them? Maybe we'll get both of you to chip in on this one, but we'll start with Keely on this one.
Oh boy, that's hard. I've had a lot of really great experiences in a lot of areas of the world. I think that my time in England, and I know that I know Leela's on the broadcast, and I know that she's going to agree with me on this one, that in terms of how they develop an umpiring community, they get that right. It is so incredibly supportive, and there's so many layers, and you make these deep friendships. And Monday morning turns into a text fest where everybody's reaching out to each other to say, how did your game go? Did anything cool happen? And it's just the data traffic must just skyrocket every Monday in England because umpires are doing it all. So they definitely get that right. I think that it really is a reflection of the level of professionalism that the international officials like Laurie bring to a tournament. That sets the tenor of the entire event. So I'd say that it's not really a geographical thing, it's a personnel thing. And when you've got great people like Laurie running tournaments and running the benches and making sure that all those details are taken care of, I'm not just sucking up to you, Laurie, okay? I'm telling you the truth. I really feel this, that when you guys take away all those possible distractions, everything that happens outside the big white box, we can do amazing stuff inside the white box. And that is where I think that's where you really make a big difference. So yeah, I think I've had lots of great times, and really the hockey family around the world is, by and large, we treat our umpires and our officials really well.
Yeah. I think for me, one of the best experiences I've had is the last few years I've been really involved with Junior Premier Hockey in the US. So it's in like all across the Eastern Seaboard, they have this Junior Premier Hockey for outdoor and indoor. And Laura Hess brought me in 3 years ago. I think it was 2017 was my first event with them. And then she's kept me along as the TD for Region 1 to 4, which is massive. It's New York State down to Massachusetts. So every year I'll do an outdoor tournament with them. And then they also have an indoor tournament that I do that's in mid-Pennsylvania somewhere. But they treat their officials so well, and it's because there's so many events down there that umpires can go to, and they don't want an umpire to choose something just because they'll get paid better somewhere. So they treat everyone extremely, extremely well. It's a really great learning opportunity for tech officials and umpires. So if you're in Eastern Canada and you have weekends free, then you definitely want to try and work at some of their events, because they really do. They have an umpire manager at every event. They have a tech official. They have a TD. They have everybody's taken very well care of. And it's a really great opportunity to grow and learn. And I'm taking as much as I can from them to try and develop here as well. So it's a really great partnership to try and help develop the people that need that push and that extra experience.
Really cool. And yeah, that sounds like an awesome experience. Moving into our last 10, 15 minutes here, we want to talk a little bit about the Field Hockey Canada umpiring and officiating pathway. Now, the two of you sit on committees for Field Hockey Canada involved in umpire education officials. Yeah, maybe I'll just get you to talk a little bit about that. Obviously, Field Hockey Canada wants to open more doors and more avenues for people to get involved on the officiating side of the game. So maybe we'll start with Keely here. But can you talk a little bit about your involvement on the administration side, being involved in the officials subcommittee, or what have you? And maybe you could talk, just about anything going on behind the scenes, and how I know all the nuts and bolts aren't ironed out yet. And it feels like the type of pathway to get you to the top will forever be changing. But what's it like right now? And maybe you could walk us through that.
Yeah, like you said, Kevin, we are going through a massive transition time. And in a way, I don't like to say this out loud, but maybe COVID wasn't the worst thing to happen right now in terms of our entire structure of how we're doing things, because we have gone through a really challenging period with Field Hockey Canada and domestic competition, and I think we're seizing this opportunity to just, like Laurie is going to say as well, blow everything up and try to really respond to the reality of what we have in Canada for and be able to serve our local hockey populations much more effectively. So the chart that's on the slide there shows you the basic structure of how you move up. And so generally you could start at a community level as an umpire, and that's really geared to maybe parents that would love to, pick up a whistle and be able to contribute to the games that their kids are playing, or, before and after their kids' games, or people who are really new to the game and just want a basic understanding of the rules and to be able to help out with some junior stuff. Provincial is where you would start if you have more of a background in the game, maybe you've been playing for a few years, but this is where you really get the hardcore. These are what the rules are. Here are the basics of positioning and management and advantage and things like that. And it will allow you in most places to be able to umpire adult level competition. It depends and it varies. And this is what we're shifting, because what competitions we have available to us now to staff as umpires have changed a lot, like incredibly, since I started out. So we're revamping the requirements to fit in with that. And then, regional is where you really start getting into the more focused and high level competitions, and Canadian gets you right to the top of domestic competition in Canada and available for selection for international events as a potential FIH umpire. So if you're looking to get started as an umpire, the best way to do it is to actually, when you finish playing, is walk up to the umpire on the field and say, "Hey, I want to get started." And they will be able to guide you to the right programs. Obviously, your provincial association is going to be a great resource and be able to tell you what's up and going. We're looking at being able to provide a core of information in what we would call asynchronous online learning environments. And then that will hopefully, we do that countrywide, that'll free up the educators in all the various provinces to be able to provide the soft skill mentoring and all the feedback, and to spend the time with umpires who are going out to their first games or their 50th games or their 150th games to help them improve and give them that coaching feedback. So that's what we're working on right now as we speak on the national level in these task forces. And we're working really hard on that. But if there's anybody here listening or who watches this on YouTube later and has ideas, has feedback, suggestions, my contact information is going to go up in a minute, but I would love to hear from you on that, because we are here to serve you. And, you can tell us, where are the holes? What do you think we can do better? Do you have ideas of ways that we could be teaching you how to umpire? bring it on. We'd love to have it.
Right on. Laurie, maybe you could talk a little bit about the officiating side and where it mirrors the umpiring side, and just sort of how things are going on over there.
Yeah, sure. So like Keely said, we're blowing up the system, and we're really looking at, just because this is how we've always done it doesn't mean it's the right way, and we're looking at that across the board. For tech officials in Ontario, I know there's been some training in the past, but I also know the last few events have been, we need a body, so sit down and I'll teach you as we go. So it was really a lot of training in the moment, which adds to the chaos at the beginning, right? So we're looking, and this is brand new as of last night. We had a meeting and we talked about having training for local, your levels would be local, provincial, national, and international. So progressing people through those training events, environments, and giving the kind of the potentially asynchronous, some of it, like Keely mentioned. So things that are online that they can read and learn on their own. But a lot of it is going to have to be done facilitated discussions, especially when you start getting into the national and international events. And that's when we're really teaching you how to be a TD and a TO. And those are the soft skills. How would you react in this situation? Tell me what the rules say. Let's have a conversation and work it through, because unfortunately there's a lot of gray lines, blurred lines in our rules and regs that, how do you interpret it? What's the spirit of the rule? How would we work through this situation? So we're working through that, and I'm also helping coordinate that umpire education and pathway group. So that's also tons of fun. I am the chair of the Field Hockey Canada Officials Committee, so that's kind of why I've got my hands in all the different pots, and hopefully can slowly let things gather its own momentum. But we also have some groups working on domestic appointment pathway for domestic events, and then another group working on international appointments. And we may have more in the works, just waiting for the next officials committee to talk about them before we make any official announcements. So lots going on, and hopefully what we end up making is a more open and transparent community. So people know why decisions were made certain ways. People know who to talk to when they have a question. So when that kid comes off the field and says, Keely, I want to be an umpire. Okay, perfect. This is your pathway. So keeping those channels open across the country. And like Keely said, COVID has definitely taught us a few things, and how we can better use Zoom to engage with people that may have experience in something that are across the country and bring them into our training sessions. Things like that, we definitely have the time to explore now. So those are just a few of the things that we're looking at right now.
Great. Well, thanks to both of you for all the work you do behind the scenes, and just on behalf of FHC, you know, we're all looking forward to, you know, those guidelines looking a little clearer and everything. And yeah, so we're hoping to share that with the greater community. We've got a couple questions that rolled in at the end there. I'm going to click to the final slide. And we have about 5-7 minutes left here, so I'll throw these out here. This one's from Leela, and we've got, this one's going to go to both of you. And because we're just coming up against the edge of our timeline here, we'll try to keep our answers brief. But do you have any pregame rituals? We'll throw to Keely first, and then we'll go for Laurie.
Pregame rituals, man. You know, I used to think that I needed a very regimented and a very serious approach to getting myself ready to umpire a game. And I mean, I went through years and years where I did things like I tried to meditate. I would go off on my own and do a yoga sequence for a while and all that kind of stuff. Or I'd find a quiet corner. I'd put my music in and I'd have a certain playlist and that sort of thing. And I realized that actually didn't work for me, because when I get on the pitch, I put so much pressure on myself to try to deliver the best performance I possibly can, that my natural tendency, my natural personality is actually to be very stern and officious, and nobody likes that in an umpire. It took me a long time to figure it out. And so what I realized is that my pregame, I need to look after my physical warm-up, obviously, and there is a degree of calming down that I like to do. But actually, if I'm walking around and I'm talking to players and I'm making jokes with coaches and I'm hanging out with Laurie and I'm just gassing it up, that's actually when I umpire my best. So part of having a pregame ritual is understanding your own personality and your own needs, and what works for somebody else, honestly, is not going to necessarily work for you. So don't be afraid to try a few different things in the right settings and in the right way. You know, there's still, if I was at the Junior World Cup, I wouldn't be walking around and like playing a prank on a player, for example. But, you know, knowing that there's a time and a place for degrees of that kind of thing, and knowing whether that works for you, that's the key, I think.
Laurie?
Yeah, for me, it would depend on what my role is. So if I'm the timing judge, I wouldn't say it's a pregame ritual, but I'm really focused on the clock and making sure I'm thinking through it, like, because it's not just one button, it's like multiple things now, especially with the countdown clock. So it just depends on what my role is. If I'm the TO, I'm definitely thinking more about like keeping my calm, like focus. But I think before everything, I take a deep breath, just take a deep breath and everything will be fine. So I guess if I had one thing I did with any of the roles, that would be what it is.
Right on. And then just to close things out, we've got a couple minutes left. We had a question come through from Roll, and I mean, I think one of the earlier questions asked about some of the experiences that you've had that have been the best, and organizations or clubs or countries that really get it right. But maybe without maybe going too far into it, what are some of the most challenging or worst experiences you've had out there, or kind of crazy things that have happened? Let's go Laurie first, then Keely, and this will be the last question that we'll answer. So we'll keep it to a couple of minutes.
I honestly haven't had terrible experiences. I would say, if anything, it's misdirected passion from coaches that would be right.
Well said.
Yeah, it's just, I've been very lucky on my international appointments. I haven't had buses break down or sleep in bunkers or anything like that. Like, I've been fairly lucky, and I shouldn't say that because now my next tournament will go very wrong. I don't think I have an answer for that because everything so far has been good. I think coming into nationals in 2018, when it was a 10-day festival event and the day before we're still pulling volunteers for the table, that was a challenge and took a long time to iron out the details. But I think overall, I've been fairly lucky. I'll let Keely talk about her experiences.
I know. I'm like, oh, don't you worry, honey. I will fill in this blank for you.
Yeah.
My goodness. Yeah. When Laurie mentions things like buses breaking down and sleeping in bunkers, one of the interesting things about being able to go abroad is that you see how you might be going to smaller hockey nations and to smaller tournaments, and it's a real struggle out there. So I remember one CIC games that I went to in Puerto Rico. All the matches there got played in the outfield of a baseball diamond. And one year we actually had to keep repainting the lines because they painted them in water soluble paint because they didn't want to, ruin the baseball field. But then it would rain, or, they would actually water the turf and erase the lines. So that was kind of crazy. And one time in Puerto Rico, I remember we really struggled at the beginning. We were staying in the quote unquote Olympic Village, and it was more like a prison. Everything got locked down at night at 10 o'clock, and it was like literally gates got drawn and nobody could leave or enter, and the food was really substandard. And we ended up basically the two neutrals, I was one of them, we went to the umpire managers and we gave like, this changes or we're leaving, and you can't have a tournament without your neutrals. So we were willing to take that bullet for everybody else because the younger, more junior umpires were absolutely freaked out. We ended up staying at an Army base on the south edge of the island. So it was a little bit better. But you know what? After we went through that tournament, that group of umpires there, we bonded like you would not believe. And we can look back on those experiences and make the jokes and remember when we were sitting outside and the ants were crawling all over us, and you know, we tell all these stories, and it's actually made it a beautiful experience for some really weird reason. I guess that's what post-traumatic stress is for some people, and that's what we did. So you'll be thrown into these adversarial situations that you think, holy crap, this is brutal, but you come out of the other side with a better appreciation of the people around you, and just knowing you can survive that adversity and you can still go out on the pitch and you can still do a good hockey game. You know, that's a great thing to learn. So I hope that doesn't have anybody shying away from going to Puerto Rico to umpire and field hockey tournament.
Great. Well, thank you both so much. We saw some nice messages in the chat box there. So nice to catch up with both of you and to chat about this. It was really fun. From Keely and Laurie, I'm Kev from Field Hockey Canada, and thank you so much. And we'll have this archived over the next couple of days. And you know, we look forward to hearing your feedback on these webinar sessions. We did 10 over the last few months, and I think we're taking a little bit of a break now, but in the fall, we'll probably fire these sessions up because they've been really well attended. So thank you very much. And Keely and Laurie, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.